And welcome to another exciting edition of my LinkedIn Live content UX audits. I'm just going to do my regular checks to make sure that this is actually streaming to the different platforms that I have it set up with. And it looks like it is, so that's great. Just making sure everything's working. A reminder that there is a chat function. So, whichever platform that you're tuning in from, basically, if you reply to where you see this, whether it's on Twitter, now X, Facebook, LinkedIn, if you just kind of like reply to that same post where the video is, then I will see your comments as we go through and can answer any questions. Something that I just learned is that when you stream live on LinkedIn, it's kind of interesting. It changes your LinkedIn cover photo to the stream itself. So that's kind of fun. I was just checking to see if that actually worked, and it is. So with that being said, we can get started for today. Just a reminder, if you want your content to be audited in the future, like what I'm going to be doing today, you can use this form at the bottom, blogsmith.tips, minus the vowels, /content UX. It just has a couple quick questions, mostly the URL to where your content lives. It should be an online piece of content because we are auditing not only the content itself, but the design where it lives. And then it'll ask a couple other questions like, if there's anything you want me to focus on or comment on, your name, and that's pretty much it. So, today, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I want to say before we get started. Today, we're tuning in during an exciting time, I think, in SEO, like outside of kind of what we're focusing on today. There are a lot of things happening in terms of the recent Google March spam update. So that just happened. We did one of these LinkedIn Lives about that 2 weeks ago. So go back and catch the recording if you want to learn a little bit more about that, if that's news to you, or if you want to dig into some of the things that, were notable to us at the Blogsmith about that. There's also lots of changes happening in the search engine results pages, AI overviews. That's another thing that we're looking into, that we're curious about, that has yet to obviously see the full effect of in the world of content and SEO. And then there was a big recent leak in Google's internal documentation that we're all kind of sifting through right now. So, I think it's fair to say that it's a very exciting time in SEO and also a very exhausting one. So take that, however you will. But today we are going to focus on auditing some content. And I will switch to show you what we are going to be auditing today, which is this blog post from the Solid Starts app. So for those that don't know, I am recently-ish a new mom and find myself immersing myself in the content world of being a parent and all the things that I didn't know before that I need to perhaps not become an expert on, but at least have some understanding of. And so, most of the content that I consume these days is like, what's going on with my baby? Is he all right? What do I need to think about next? And so I came across this piece of content naturally through the process of doing that. And I just thought that it has a lot of lessons for things that are going really well, and maybe also some lessons for things that could be improved. So I guess just to give some context to those who may not be aware, the Solid Starts app is an app for people who have babies that are transitioning from the bottle to solid foods. And so it gives you some guidance for how to do that the right way, different ways to prepare food in an age appropriate way. And just how to kind of like keep getting them closer to being able to eat people food and, the natural process of growing up. So this particular article was about how to get your baby to transition from the bottle to drinking from a cup. And I guess we'll start basically like the website itself, and then we'll get into the content itself. The first thing that strikes me more on maybe like the negative side before we get to like the things that are really good about this piece of content. The website itself has to me, a confusing menu structure. There's not kind of like a underlying mechanism, like these things, these words, these phrases don't really relate to each other. Like you see something like toddlers, and so you might expect to see something like babies, and then like things nested under each. And they have things like guides and courses, and they have their app, and these are kind of like resources, also this database. And granted, like, you don't necessarily want your most important things to live in a sub menu of a menu, but just that there's no real like underlying categorization here. Maybe that's what it is. It kind of just feels like each of these is like a totally separate thing, and it's hard to relate it to the other words in this list. So great content could maybe benefit from rethinking organization on the website itself. The app is quite organized, and it's both the website and the app, I think, are very like straightforward and simple in the way they're put together. They're not bogged down by design or too much content and things like that. And that's why I really like, this app and the website where their supportive content lives on. But yeah, I think there's something a little bit confusing about the menu that could be refactored. And also it's like, well, what is the most important action up here? I would think that it's getting people to download the app, because that is the vehicle by which they make money. They also have some other like educational courses you'll see as we go through here, which is another way they get money. But I think the main thing, and sort of like the way to get people to buy other things, is by first getting them used to the app and seeing the expertise that they've put together there, and just, really like the database of how you can prepare these foods. And the paid functionality of it is that you can then save like the foods that your child has tried, and I think take notes and things like that. And so in my opinion, like, downloading the app, maybe there should even be a CTA that says download in front of the word app. To me, I would have highlighted that on this website, or maybe the guides and courses. And it's also unclear, I would say, like this cup drinking article, I think I found it through the app, but how would I find it on the website? Would it be under guides and courses? Would it be under starting solids? Like, it's kind of unclear to me. I think maybe that's the root of why the navigation is bothering me, especially given the context of this example. There should be some sort of like clear hierarchy and a way to, like, if you kind of know what you're looking for, where you should go to find it. So that's ultimately the issue with the menu for me. The next sort of negative thing is the title itself is not very descriptive. I mean, cup drinking, it makes sense in the context of I clicked here, I got here, right? But, it doesn't give the context of like for infants, that are transitioning from the bottle, or, on the way to toddlerhood and next steps, or whatever it is. So something like that I think would be really beneficial. I'd be curious to see if that's like also their meta title, if they even care about SEO. That might not be a factor here, but I think that regardless of how somebody lands on this page and the context they have, it's always worth reiterating in terms of the title and kind of re-adding that, especially if I was sending this to a friend or accessing it later, I might forget that context. So there's no, reason not to add it. The image here is very reflective, I think, of the rest of kind of like their branding, for lack of a better word that immediately comes to mind. It's consistent with the other images, as you'll see as we go through this article. But it's also interesting because when we talk about in terms of like parenting and transitioning a child or a baby from a bottle to a cup, like usually you're thinking of like a sippy cup, and this child is, small, toddler age, but has just like a regular cup that you'd expect, like an adult to also drink from. It doesn't have like a cover or a straw. And so it's kind of an interesting choice for this particular article. But now let me talk a little bit about what I do like about how this content is structured from a user experience standpoint. First of all, it has this lovely scrolling table of contents. And so, content professionals, UX professionals, design professionals all have their opinions about, like, should your content have a sidebar? Like, ultimately, does it distract from the main purpose of your website? The content itself, does it provide a distraction from the reading experience. And typically, if it is including things such as maybe like links to other articles or like an email sign up form, ads, all of the above. If it's all of the above, then I would say yes, it's definitely distracting. In this case, I think it provides a real benefit to the reader because you can jump ahead to whatever is really most important to you. And I think when it comes to all this content that I've read recently about babies and understanding them and making sure they're okay, ultimately, you know, when you're dealing with something that you're inexperienced with or that causes concern, it's nice to be able to quickly, you know, find your answer. I mean, even more so than other queries, things that I would search for, you know, my role as the founder of the Blogsmith, or I'm trying to think of like other things where it's like I need an answer now. This is one of the most important topics where it's like I need an answer now, so I need the content to support that, and I think that they do a really great job of that. Although, of course, you know, drinking from a cup is probably a little bit less of need an immediate answer than like, you know, my baby's vomiting and I don't know what caused it, for example. But still, you know, it's like you have to kind of build that experience around understanding the audience of the parents who are looking for quick answers, who might, you know, be nervous because, you know, they don't know if, not with this article in particular, but if something that they're looking for that affects their baby's health, again, for example, it helps have a quick answer. So I won't wax any more poetic on that. Let's kind of keep going here. I like that the intro is pretty brief and it's pretty to the point. I do think it's a little bit abrupt to start selling, for example. So they have this, you know, starting salads, like educational course bundle. And I think it's fair for them to definitely talk about that. I would have probably waited a little bit longer. I mean, generally speaking, when it comes to design, website design and conversions and things like that, they say, you know, the most important information should be available above the fold before you start scrolling. And they could have probably achieved that in like the next section if their hero image of sorts, their featured image, was perhaps a little bit smaller. So that, you know, it doesn't have to mean like fundamentally changing a whole lot to make that work if that was their goal here. But that would be my suggestion, would be to maybe wait till the next section to start selling. Let's introduce, you know, the topic and maybe why they're expert in talking about it if somebody didn't have the context of their app and, you know, being a user of that. They are trying to sell people, so somebody might land on this without having the context of that app. So there's that. I do like, again, I think their design is simple, and I think that's really useful for me as a parent because, again, I want to focus on the answer. I read so many of these articles now that it's like I just kind of want to get to the point, right? And so it's like there's not a whole lot of distraction here in terms of design elements, and I really appreciate that. And I think that's a lesson for all of us is, you know, at the end of the day, design should help the end goal, but it's not, you don't do design in business for the purpose of just like wowing somebody. It should serve a purpose. I do like, you know, for example, the list items stand out. They're like a burgundy. It matches the treatment of the links and things like that. So let's keep looking here. Per the Blogsmith style guide, which, you know, is not something that they have to follow. It's what we use and we like, but I would recommend shorter paragraphs. Our rule is that paragraphs really shouldn't be more than like 3 lines, and that sentences shouldn't be more than 2, just because that typically means that it's getting into compound, confusing territory. And I'm not necessarily saying that I see long sentences. I'm just saying for the sake of completing that thought. So yeah, it might be nice to split this up, just make it more readable, skimmable, again, especially for this like parent audience that I've described. What I really loved about this article was how effectively they incorporated visual examples. And so, for example, you know, it's just really simple. You could do a lot with cups, right? But there's really only 2 you need for the sake of transitioning your child from a bottle. And here are the examples. I also really like the captions. You know, they sort of name the child, they give how old they are for context so that I know, like, should my child be doing this based on, you know, where he's at roughly. Milestones vary by child, of course. But, like, can I relate to this? Or is my child still, like, you know, pretty young for this concept? Or, you know, a little old for me to be focusing on this, for example. So they name the child in their examples, and there's more. They give, you know, kind of the age so that you can benchmark. And then, you know, just, like, describing the picture. And, you know, they also give examples for, like, what specific cups that you might buy if you wanted to follow along with what they're suggesting here. So very actionable, very useful. I'll also show you at the end of this, maybe I'll just show you now. You can trust what they're saying, which is important when it comes to this vertical of content, because parents, we just worry about everything, and we want to know that what we're operating off of is good information. And so as we can see here, there's actually 4 people that contributed to this article. They all have professional relevant credentials. I can see them. I know a little bit about them. In Karina's case, I could see that, you know, she's definitely a mom. She's been through this several times. I'm sure, you know, the other writers probably are too, or at least most of them, and they've contributed their knowledge to this. But, you know, just some examples of, like, of why I should trust this content, because it is so important. I don't know if this would technically qualify as, like, your money, your life in the SEO world, where it's like there's kind of a higher standard with, like, the quality of the content and, yeah, what you would expect to see. But, I mean, I would say if it's not, it should be, because babies, like, the stakes are high if you mess up. And I think it is hard to mess up if your intent is good, but yeah, bad advice could definitely lead you down the wrong path. And so something like that is, I think, the author profiles and their credentials is especially important for this type of content. Let's go back up. So these are more of like the static examples. They also have video examples, which I think is really useful for a topic like this. Having multiple different forms of media is really great. At the Blogsmith, we think the same thing. It's not just about the static imagery, and it's not just about one type of image. It's about different types of visuals, whether that's embeds from YouTube, GIFs that explain or that demonstrate like a process, like in a SaaS tool, how to do like one really specific thing, or infographics that help you see something like a statistic or something more visually. For me, I'm not a super math person, so when I read text that is about like a statistic, for example, I get confused pretty easily. But when I see an image that demonstrates that in context, I grasp the concept a lot more quickly. And so I think that's what they're doing here. As you can see, their table of contents of sorts is a mix between kind of like statement headings, I guess you could say, and sort of like FAQs, which I think is nice. It would be interesting to see if this is the optimal organization. Like, I might like to see all the sort of like statement headings together and all the like FAQ headings that end in a question together. That's just me. I mean, we have the table of contents, but there is something a little bit disordered about them being interspersed. And I think I'm just used to like the heuristic of seeing the FAQs at the bottom of the page. That's just a thought. Trying to see what else stands up. Something like steps. Maybe that would look nice as a list item, you know, just again to sort of introduce more visual variation, make it easier to skim. I like how they've at least bolded, you know, consistently these different steps. So that's just a thought. I like how they also do kind of like side by sides with their examples. That's a little bit unique in terms of a lot of the content that I've seen. Usually it's kind of like one thing at a time, explanation, next thing, but they put things again in context, you know, some variation in terms of the examples. Like, here's this particular child at one stage in their development, and then here she is a month later. And so it's cool too as a parent to be able to see the progression and to understand that like you have to start somewhere, right? And also that, you know, your baby might not be able to do something one day, but the next day it's like amazing by how much they change and how much they advance so quickly. And so that's kind of reassuring to just like see in the context of this topic. Again, some like pretty long paragraphs. But a lot of practical information here. Just trying to think too, like if there's anything else that I would do to organize this information. They do a great job with the visuals, but I think more text formatting, like I said, with like the steps here and maybe using like list items could be useful. You know, you could like answer the question quickly, like for here they say completely optional and then they go into more detail, and then like what would maybe be beneficial is to have that answer and then add a line break and then add the supportive other details. I'm trying to think of exactly what I'm trying to say here, but essentially it's kind of thinking like how you would answer how you would optimize a featured snippet for search, for example. Typically, when you're optimizing a featured snippet, and you know there's a lot of different formats, and so there's a lot of nuance to how you would optimize for a specific format. But in this case, it's usually like you answer the question pretty simply and matter of fact in a sense, but then you get into more detail after you've sort of optimized for the snippet. So maybe that approach would be useful here as well. Thinking of that parent reader who's looking for that quick answer, I think thinking about each of these questions like a featured snippet that they're trying to optimize for would be helpful for the reader. It would probably also help them in search, again, if that is their goal here, which it should be. I don't know why it wouldn't be. So just another thought. There's probably some things in here too that are like really important. Like we see a little asterisk here. Before 12 months old, we don't want baby to fill up on water instead of more nutritious formula or breast milk. There should be maybe some variations in text treatments, like little boxes that's like pro tip or like warning, you know, because again, we're dealing with this baby knowledge where like there are consequences if you get this wrong. The caveats are important more so than they are, I don't know, in other industries where the stakes just aren't as high, or not industries, but verticals. So that would be a great way, I think, to vary the formatting here is to create some different treatments, like call out boxes, and you know, red is like this is really important, like a red background. Blue is like, oh, this is just like a reminder, something like that. They could create a mechanism for doing that. This is cool too. Like they're kind of, I'm sure like a lot of these babies are actually like the people who wrote this is children. But it's cool how they also are putting themselves into the article here. Carrie, who, you know, is part of Solid Starts. This is her child. This is her putting this into context for us. So I always love, I think, when people are writing content and they put themselves into it. I mean, that's that like expertise part of EEAT. That's like what sets this article apart from others like it, where it's a little bit more cold and clinical, you know, like for example, I'm thinking of another outlet of baby articles that I frequently read, which is What to Expect. And I think most of the articles that I read there, they're more matter of fact. They're listicles. They're, you know, for example, like I just enrolled my son in infant swim classes, so you could think of like an article that's about like the best swim diapers. And it's a little bit more agnostic of the person writing it. They're still relying on experts and they feature those people, but you know, they're not putting themselves in it necessarily. There's exceptions to that. I'm just thinking generally. So it is nice, and I do think there is a search benefit, and I do think there is a reader benefit to putting yourself in it and saying, you know, I'm not just writing this, but I'm sharing this from my actual experience. I went through this too. Okay, what else do we want to say? Something like this could probably benefit from like subheadings instead of just having like a descriptive phrase sentence and bolding it. I think that would be a nice structure here. Another thing that they could maybe think of for organizing the structure of this article, like the different sort of headings, is like what's sort of like foundational knowledge, what are the steps to get from bottle to sippy cup, and then what are things that are like warnings, what's more of like the negative stuff to look out for, or like problems or troubleshooting. That could perhaps make sense. And maybe they have done that and I've ignored it, but to have kind of like part 1, part 2, part 3 and clear organization could be beneficial too, because it is just a long article. And again, I'm thinking about that parent who wants that answer really quick. And this article too, this is more like educational. It's like get to it as you get to it, more so than like my baby has, something wrong with them and I need to determine if I need to take them to the doctor or not. So this is different than that, right? But again, I think the same principles apply, that if you applied that here, you could apply it to any other article on your website that would be about, maybe those more timely and troublesome things. I think that's most of what I wanted to talk about today. One thing that they're maybe missing here too, as we get to just the end, is kind of what do we like to do at the Blogsmith, is to have that like final conclusion, wrap up. It's a great opportunity to add a relevant call to action. So they're kind of missing out on that. They've already done that at the very beginning. And I think you have to question too, like, is somebody ready to move on this particular call to action when they haven't even read, the first section? That's kind of a long-term content marketing question. As it's like, how early do you add that CTA? And to some extent, you probably have to test it to actually know how effective it is. But another thing too is like, why not repeat it? And I think especially after they've had a chance to read some of the content, but certainly at the very end, after you've kind of made your case for why you're the expert and why people should listen to the things you say, and you have this app, that goes into great detail on that during an important time in baby's development. And that they also have, clearly these other resources that you could buy to help with other things that go into greater detail. It seems like a missed opportunity to not own that narrative a little bit at the end of this. So that's what I got for you today. I don't see any comments. I've went a little bit longer than I had planned to. I will remind you once again to use this form to submit your content for audit. I would love to help you find opportunities at the end of the day. That's what we're doing here. We're talking about the things that are really great and the things that we could make even better. So please submit your content, blogsmith.tips/content UX. And then our next event in 2 weeks will be about how to maintain content consistency with fewer resources in light of all of things like layoffs happening in the tech world, market instability in general with the economy. It seems like a good time to talk about how to do more with less. And so that will be our next event. It's live on my LinkedIn, so you can hit attend if you'd like to attend live, or, have a reminder to check the recording once it's done. The recording for that event and for this event will live on pretty much all these platforms it's streaming on that you might be watching this from, but certainly on LinkedIn and also my YouTube afterwards. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this has sparked some sort of ideas for your content and your content experience, and I will look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks.